Welcome to the Q.A.C. Team Podcast, your quality assurance consulting team. Quality is our highest priority for your business with one goal, one direction, success. And now here's your host, Charles Luttrell. Good morning, Scott. Welcome back.
Hey, Chuck. Good morning. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you coming back. Talk about back to school. This is a tricky time of year for everybody. Coming off of vacations, summer vacation, school, college, and we students who are leaving the restaurant industry, going back to school, back to work. So it puts restaurants in a little bit of a position for hiring new people, stress for the parents, getting all that line back up, their schedules for school and their work schedules. Let's talk a little bit about that topic. What do you think?
Yeah, let's divulge into that. That sounds like a good idea.
That's a deep dive for us, isn't it? So what's your experience with running a restaurant and having this time of year when kids are going back to school and they're quitting their jobs to pursue their academic careers?
I've seen it almost at every level, from management to into ownership. I saw seasonal employees in almost every restaurant that I've ever been in. The hospitality industry is a huge temporary employment, kind of like a hub. Um, I don't know if it's the same in every single industry, but I do know that restaurants have a ton of temporary employment they get through, from season to season, holiday to holiday,
Right.
those types of things. But
It's slightly different. I'm not going to cut you off. I'm sorry, but
No,
it's slightly different than retail because retail is kind of steady, right? The restaurant industry, because people like to be servers and bussers, that makes it a little bit more flexible for them, right?
I just think the crux of it is just because the people are just slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
Just by nature. I think that restaurants, get the benefit of having those, those placeholders, those seasonal employees, that I mean, I guess it would depend on each one of the, the situations from each employee. Some people just want to come in and work for the summer because they're younger and they want to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I've seen, professional servers work a seasonal job, um, and absolutely outperform, other full-time employees. I've seen that, also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it just depends on the individual. Um, I think the crux of the importance is on that individual. But yeah, I've had a lot of experience with, transitioning from full-time to part-time,
Mm-hmm.
and as a seeing that transition as a manager.
Right. And what kind of because my thinking is on the customer service side, it's got to be a little stressful because during the hiring process, right? You have to discuss schedule, the hours they can and cannot work, especially with each state's laws, right, of what they can and cannot do, right?
If you're talking about younger staff members, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eh,
but like I said, like I worked in Rehoboth Beach for a long time, and I saw servers down there that they only worked, 4 to 6 months, a year. Um, and this is back, I don't I don't even know, but this goes back 20 plus years. Um, I was probably 25 when I was there. Um, Somewhere in that range. I'm not exactly sure. Um, but I was very young in my recovery, and I'm just trying to place the time as we're talking. But
mhm.
um, what I saw was servers that made enough, money to, and when they would only work, you know, maybe 2 quarters out of the year, and they would take the rest of the year off. And
Hmm.
they made enough to, live in their homes, and that was before the second big like growth spurt in that town.
Hmm.
Um, I've worked in other beach towns, like I worked in Rumson, New Jersey, which I'm not so sure is considered a beach town, but again, you had a huge influx of temporary employees.
Hmm.
Um, so the challenges from the management standpoint, it can be daunting, but it's all about how you perceive the challenge.
Yeah.
If if you're looking at that and saying, how am I going to fill the next 4 days if they can only work one?
Hmm.
It's going to feel like hell. But if you look at that and say, okay, I got one day filled, now four more, it's all about the perception change.
Hmm.
It'll definitely take the stress out of your job. Um, it'll make and what I've found is that you will accomplish your task a whole lot faster because you feel better about it.
Hmm. Yeah, that was part of what I was going to mention was, the stress part of, you got the stress of these kids going back to school, they're leaving their job, and then you got the stress of the restaurant, right? So they're going to be short staffed. So now they have to prepare to hire, train, and get other people on board to pick up the spots where these kids are leaving that restaurant, right? So it's kind of a crazy process, right?
Uh, I think it's just part of the gig. I mean,
Hmm.
if your job is to hire and run a restaurant, or to hire and run a company in any field, you kind of have to take your locale into consideration when you're making decisions.
Hmm.
You know, if you know that employees leaving in September and you're, it's now June, depending on how you, again, it depends on your perception of the challenge. It's going to
Hmm.
make or break your stress level when you're looking at the problem. Because if you put it back on the back burner and you're like, I don't have to worry about this until, you know, August 15th, well, September 1st is going to come real fast.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
that's not going to be a lot of fun.
And then you're going to be stressed out trying to find
Yeah.
people and find the right people, right? Because that's a whole other process when you interview people. You may get, 10, 15 applicants, but then how many of those 10 or 15 are really going to, you know, handle the job that you're looking for, right? That's another part of it, right?
It is, because if you're not doing things to hold on to them in the next quarter, like if you're not in contact with them, if you're not reaching out to them, um, yeah, I mean it's definitely something that needs to be navigated, with intent. You can't just like let that just fall by the wayside.
Right.
Um, in my experience, when I was not in a seasonal town, still hiring part-time employees, uh, I tried to maintain, contact long before the actual hiring of the part-time employee took place.
Yeah.
So every month I would check in, something like, hey, I'm just looking at, at the time frame, are we still on schedule for like a, September 1st start or September 15th start, whatever it was.
Right.
But I still stayed in contact with the potential new hire,
Hmm.
um, and then relayed any information back to the team.
Right. Hey, I just thought of something when you mentioned staying in contact with these new hires. It just came across my mind to ask this question. Would you happen to know what? I mean, this might not be something you can answer, but would you happen to know? Is there a percentage of employees that do return to the same restaurant for seasonal? Like, let's say they bump out because they're going to school, and then when school's back out, they come back to the same restaurant. Is that something that you see? Is that a frequent thing, or is that rare, or what? Is there like a percentage that you could probably touch on to that, or?
I had really good I just went straight to Verbena when when you asked that question. I had some really good uh kids that were going to, college students, um, that came out of high school. Um, they worked, under the guidelines of the state, and sometimes the job kind of morphed. Sometimes it was like, answering phones, and then it started to, you know, we started to train kind of the parameters of what good language is in a professional setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they were very young, and we weren't giving them, a ton of responsibility. What I thought was more important was the way that they handled themselves in the world, even though, like, these are kids. Like, so let's still, like, I want to make sure that we understand what we're talking about. Um, we weren't expecting, Michelin rated service from a 14-year-old, junior in high school, but what we did do is we expected them to kind of, nurture the task that we were giving them. Um, and that, that was the goal. That was our intent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had, obviously some veterans in the industry. Um, and we were teaching them good evening, you're welcome, please and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of just, those etiquette things.
The
Um,
basic etiquettes of how to really interact with guests.
yes. And so,
Yeah.
and not just guests, but it was people.
Yeah.
It was people that was in general, that was kind of like the overall blanket intent of the lesson. Um, and we had a lot of success with that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we also, if there was ever something that, that was a problem, maybe a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's a misstep in service or something, I would tell the servers to go make friends. And that was kind of the internal dialogue that I would tell them, go make friends out on the dining room floor. They would go, talk to the guests, while whatever challenge had to get rectified got rectified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, let's say the young kid took a 7:15 reservation, and we didn't have a chair for it. Um, it's the the expectation on a on a 14-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid, I don't know, whatever it was, but the expectation on the kid is not there. It's just not, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense. Yeah.
like, there's no pressure coming from the house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in order to protect the well-being of the younger kid that wanted to take the first job. Like, I was the first job for a few people,
Uh-huh.
a few younger people, and for all intents and purposes, some people would be like, "This is your first restaurant." I'm like, "Are you sure you want this one to be? Of all the restaurants in the world, like, you want to come to this one?"
Mm-hmm.
And they said yes. So we kind of had to take that, as seriously, as you could, because they said yes. So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they already know they already knew about who we were, and what we were doing as a company. And they knew that we were telling each other internally that we wanted to be better than everyone else. We wanted to have a professional environment that was a kind of like a proving ground, a learning ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we wanted to be able to rectify the mistakes, um, within the parameters of being, as professional as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So when when it was time to, go make friends, I would typically send out the more senior servers, to go explain the situation. We weren't making excuses. What we were doing, we weren't making excuses for the new hire, the younger person. What we were doing was, we were teaching, and we let our guests know that that's the program that we were doing.
Right.
So every year I took on one or two people, like, first time job people ever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did one in the one in the kitchen and one in the dining room. The dining room had a ton of success with that program,
Right.
and the restaurant had a ton of success with that program.
Hmm.
And it definitely makes you, for the more senior people, it definitely makes you kind of come back down to ground level where
Yeah.
you're not you're not just focused on your ego. Like it kind of
Yeah.
it'll like a 15-year-old will humble you in a second.
Hmm.
Like somebody who has a genuine intent to learn something, it's kind of like pulling the e-brake on on that thought process, and you're like, oh, I gotta slow this like
I had to
way
slow
down.
this down a second. Right. Yeah.
Like so it was I found that to be a really good exercise. Now, from the the operator standpoint, do I recommend that, to break focus, or to, there's always going to be a con, um, or something that's not going to be conducive to actually running a business. But what it did do, it was really important for the internal personal growth within, for the people in that restaurant. At
Right.
least that's what I saw.
Right.
Um,
And that's
Again, it's like, when a 4-year-old calls you on an imaginary phone, like you answer that. Like I don't care who you are, you answer
right.
that
You
phone.
answer it. Right. Yeah.
So when it was time, for these younger people to come up to me and say, "Hey, chef, what's the best way to answer the phone?" And I'm trying to do an award ceremony or work on to some private dinner. It's kind of like take it all the way back there, and
Right.
then come all the way back. And some people are gonna look at that and be like, "Are you sure you want to do all that? Because it'd be just easier just to stay up at the award ceremony and keep your focus." And that's true. Like
Right.
it would have been easier, but turning around and make sure that kid had a place to ask questions was important to me.
Right.
So that's where I wanted to. That's what I was intending to do.
Right. And that ties kind of what, my next statement would be, talking about, you know, how Q.A.C team does things on the customer service side with the reviews. You're looking at assisting these, employees who, might not be the best at what they're doing. So if you can, utilize these programs to really show them what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then nurture them, to become better employees. I think that's great that you say, hey, yeah, you're only 15 years old. You've been here for 3 weeks. Go out there and make friends and talk to guests and people, and that starts to build that repertoire of, hey, I've got good customer service skills that I can communicate.
And I was in an area with just just supreme education,
Hmm.
that which is true, which is true. I mean, I had like I don't know that much about scholastics. It's not really what I want to focus on, speaking about. But what I can say is that the people that were there were well above average in IQ, well above average in curiosity, well above average in um, putting together themselves before they came to work. And
Hmm.
like high school kids, these people did end up going out to off to college, but it was really it was really impressive for me to see that,
Hmm.
uh the way that that particular community took care of its kids, and they put out this profession these mannerisms that were just, I thought, at a higher level. The sophistication level was higher, the education level was higher. They started teaching their kids about finance and social cultures. They just seem to have, the kids just seem to have a better grasp
Hmm.
on the importance of so many different things that I'm not necessarily sure I was exposed to when I was that age.
Gotcha. That's interesting that you mentioned that. The common thread that I hear a lot, and our audience listening, if they can comment on this podcast as they're listening, look, that's not common. What I hear a lot is they struggle with the learning curve of finding the right people to do the job. And we talked about in the last episode, the one restaurant that I made a visit to, they clearly didn't care about the night shift over the day shift because the workers were younger and they had younger managers that were actually running the restaurant. So, the more common things that I hear are that they're more challenged with, finding good help.
I, I don't I don't necessarily want to talk about parenting as a opinion, but
That's a whole other just topic,
yeah,
right?
that's not, yeah. But what I would rather do is just see, talk about the positives that I saw.
Yeah.
And when I was when I was in high school and going into, trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I had a rocky start and blah, 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 whatever, it's a story. So, um, it wasn't, and it's funny, like a rocky start in your mid 20s, like you're trying to get sober because it's not gonna really work out well for you.
Hmm.
Meaning me, it wasn't gonna work out well for me. Um, I'm not necessarily sure that there were people around me that were taking the time to make sure I answered the phone correctly.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Like it wasn't, that scenario wasn't there. So so that's where that was kind of rooted because I didn't necessarily have that when I
Right.
was that age.
Right.
And there was no restaurants, guest service. The word guest wasn't even in the vocabulary yet. It wasn't, there was nothing around me that said this is going to be sustainable, long, have longevity. There's an entire world out there that you haven't even seen yet. And, nobody's going to tell me anything because I placed my eggs in a completely different basket.
Hmm.
Helping, it was self-loathing and, self-destruction. So somewhere that light had to go on
Right.
for me, which was good. But I don't want to be a part of the team that doesn't teach in the best way possible.
Right.
Like I don't want to be a part of that team. Like things are gonna be hard enough. Like some parents gonna be the bad parent on this day. Maybe a good parent on that day, or however that comes out to be.
Right.
But
Well, you got the stress of, you're trying to be a parent. You got a life you're living, you got a job, and you have to, look after your kids as well. And that's a lot of stress on them as well. But yeah, I get your point, about, you know, you want to have an environment to where these young kids that come in and going to work for you, to have some kind of understanding of what you're looking for and, how to really talk to people. That should be something that to learn. And that's why I love what I do. On the flip side of that is the program, helps keep that going by doing some, doing these undercover reviews and audits for businesses that give you that feedback of, well, this is what happened that day and this what happened at that time.
it doesn't seem like that person is going that example is really, maybe that person doesn't even want to fix the problem.
Hmm.
Like if the
Yeah.
person doesn't even want to fix the problem, then you can't fix it. Like it can't be, like you have to actually want to fix the problem.
Right. And
Um,
sometimes people don't see it as a problem, right? They look at it as, that's just somebody being somebody, right?
I
I've
ca-
seen that.
I can't get there. I can't.
Right.
I
It just blows
can't.
my
I
mind.
can't. I can't get there.
Right. It's something. Yep.
Everything is important.
Yeah.
and every there's varying degrees of importance. That, whatever, however you prioritize, the things that you prioritize, but everything's important.
Hmm.
You can't take that for granted.
Yeah.
Like if you take it for granted, you'll never have new employees, which I don't want. Like it seems like it's a really like in my head, if I play this all the way out, and I'm like, oh, if I had employees stay with me for 35 years, well, I don't necessarily because I don't know, because I haven't seen that. Like I don't know if I actually want that,
Yeah.
and if you do, then I would want the balance of bringing in new people to balance out the the difference between the staying in the groove and the staying in the rut, because if
Hmm.
they can look identical until you shake it up. So you, you won't know that you're actually in a rut, not the groove, until you bring somebody else in that has a different or no perspective of the scenario at all.
Hmm.
Bringing people with absolutely zero restaurant experience into a restaurant will absolutely open your eyes to things that you were not expecting.
Right.
You
Because you're
know,
going to find things that you never thought about that this person would need to know, and like, oh, this and that and this and that, because they don't understand the terminology and what's really involved in running a restaurant.
right. And if
You
you
know?
have good people, you'll be able to watch your people come up with new solutions to new problems.
You beat me to it. I was going to say, what about your people who have been with you for over a year, 2 years, 5 years, who really get it, who can really teach these new people, you know, the ways of your restaurant, right? Because they're all different. They're all ran
I mean,
different.
the best is when somebody already takes the initial first step. It says, chef, I got it. I'll talk to this person. And knowing that, like, there has to be an element of trust. But
Yeah.
knowing that that conversation is going to take place and that person is going to root for the company that they work for,
Hmm.
and keep the best interest of that company in mind.
Right.
Now you have staying power as an employee, for one. you know and and two, you're working on your own problem solving skills.
Yeah.
you know that's important, in an organization, and that's why having new things come in that are not going to be detrimental to the business, to the focus of the business, to the focus of the employees, that's a huge opportunity for, in my opinion, that's a huge opportunity to grow and expand the culture.
Right. Hey, just a thought off of that statement as we're moving along talking about this. In your experience, was there or is there any written procedure that you had in place in all the restaurants that you ran that you handed to an employee and said, "Hey, look, this is how we run things from a customer service perspective. Here's the questions. Here's what we look for." Was there anything like that that was physically handed to an employee, or was it more or less we discuss it, we talk about it, this is how we do things in
No,
your experience?
I had a handbook.
Nice.
uh,
Okay.
yeah, I had a handbook, and I wanted people to understand that the way that we, or the way that I operated was a little, was definitely different than a big corporate restaurant.
Right.
Um, I didn't want, like, I want my superstars to be superstars. That's what I wanted. That's what I told them. I didn't, like, listen, I want you to be you. I want you to be part of this team, but I want your personality to be you.
Hmm.
We didn't have the, hey, welcome to Verbena. My name is blah, 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 blah. I'm here to take care of you. I don't want to generally, I am generalizing this intentionally because I did not have that written down.
Right.
Like, I didn't want that. I
Okay.
didn't want it to be standardized. I wanted the steps of service and the chronological steps of service to be there.
Hmm.
That has to be there. Like, you're going to touch this table 30 times in 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on how this, what the guest selected that evening. But I, I didn't want there to be the standardized canned speech.
Right.
Like I just did because I saw the people. Some people are really good in that free form space, and some people aren't. So the people that were uncomfortable with not having this script already written for them
Right.
kind of learned a lot about, the things that you were good at and the things that you weren't good at. Because the people over on the other side that maybe they kept their notes to themselves, or maybe
Right.
they didn't have notes at all. Like
Right.
that's the thing that, those kind of free form people that are vets, I would hope that you had notes,
Yeah.
but what I'm
And that would
saying
help
is,
with
is
the
that,
stress levels too, right? I mean,
oh,
you got these young,
taxing. You
right? You got
have
these
done.
young, yeah, because you got these young kids coming in and they're worried about a script and what I got to say and how I got to act in front of all your guests that are coming in. And you're like, look, figure it out. This is what we're doing here. Free form it and make it your
Here's your
own.
guidelines. I want you to be you. You know what I mean? Like if you're the I don't if you're the chatty Cathy, go out there, and anybody that has been to my restaurant will know that. Every single server touched every single table.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was just a parameter. Like I want you to get to know your people. I want the company to know the people that are coming in to support the company, and vice versa. So we knew how many times people were coming in. We knew what their favorite things were. We knew their wives' names. We knew their husbands' names. We
Mm-hmm.
knew as much information about these people as we could because we garnered for it. Like we went for it. We made a concerted effort to make those people feel as comfortable as we possibly could in the setting
Mm-hmm.
that we had. you know and the only way to do that is in part through charisma, interpersonal communication skills, and you have to be a good human. Like you can't necessarily fake not being a good human. It's good. Like you're going to stick out. So if you're not answering the phone on a 4-year old when they call you on their imaginary phone, like, are you really a good human? Like that would be like, kind of like the dog test,
Yeah.
like that type of thing, like, is the dog going to come near you, or, that sort of thing is super important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And my staff, I for the most part, I can't think of many, but over the years, for the most part, I think a lot of people really grasp onto that because they've removed the structured stress level of
Mm-hmm.
being confined into this little hole,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And that's part of the program that I put together that I want to share with you. We talked about that briefly, but I got to share it with you. It talks about that, right? So it talks about processes and procedures and the generalization of a good customer experience and good customer service. And putting that into play helps really relieve a lot of that stress that we see that these young kids are put under when they're trying to start their adult careers, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, you have to have the processes and procedures. They have to be there. There is a
Yeah.
handbook. We had checklists. We had prep lists. We had all of the absolute essential things that you need to have a successful running restaurant.
Hmm.
But you that I think that part is maybe just one of the parts that separated me from a managerial point, um, standpoint of allowing people to be themselves.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's tough. People ask about the look of a server, tattoos and body art and things like that.
Piercings. Yeah. Right. You get a
Yeah.
lot of
Well,
scrutinization on that. Right.
but here's my thing when it comes to that. If you have purple hair, it doesn't change your IQ to me.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter to me. All right. So if
Yeah.
you have purple hair and you're gonna be my sommelier, and you already have your credentials with you, I am not going to turn you away by the color of your hair. Like it might be something else, but it's not going to be because you have purple hair.
Hmm.
So it again, I want people to be the best that they can be with within the confines of like you have to obviously you have to get in where you fit in, and I'm not saying that that's not important either, but just having the disposed judgment of, this person is not going to work well in my company because they have an appearance that is it well groomed purple hair? Is it pulled back, purple hair?
It's I'm sitting here just thinking about it. It's like I could picture that, right? Well, you're not going to fit in here because you got purple hair, and you're not going to be a good server. That's so shallow, right? Because that person might be the best you ever have, who could wow your guests with the utmost experience that would just blow people away. But
Absolutely.
yet, we take that, you know,
Because
that
it's not
that
because it's going
look,
to be quote unquote like not a good look for the business. Well,
right?
I'm not necessarily sure that is the case.
Yeah.
Like I had a young Sue that I was building it at one point, and he came up with an idea. And I might butcher the idea a little bit, but one Friday it was like Fireman Mustache Friday. This he was a the lead on my line, and I later promoted this guy to Sue because I thought what he did was a great like team building exercise. And what he did is he shaved into a fireman style mustache and then came into work and walked around and told everybody. He acted like, "Well, you don't know about Fireman Friday." He was like, "Hey, it's chef." And I'm walking around and I was like, this guy just made this up 5 minutes ago.
Uh-huh.
So it kind of put me on the spot. Like, am I going to support this? Or what? And it worked. It
Uh-huh.
worked. The next Friday, all the guys came in with fireman mustaches. The next day, you know, and it worked. So simply because somebody's doing something that may or may not change the look of your organization, to me that was one of the brightest moments that guy had, because what he
Hmm.
ended up doing later on is now he's probably running his own restaurant by now. Like that guy's probably running a kitchen, and subsequently from those years that elapsed, that's what he did because he understood that team building was important,
Right.
and it was a non-offensive type of thing to do in
Hmm.
order to garner the support of your team.
Right.
A
I,
year later, I made him a Susan.
yeah, that's impressive. Yeah,
Yeah, he
he
was
took upon himself
that
to,
was a great idea.
yeah, he took upon himself to come up with something that, just worked and
And it
people
was
followed.
hysterical because he was walking around talking to guys like they didn't know,
Yeah.
and so like all these guys were looking at him like, there's no such thing as Fireman Friday. What the hell's Fireman Friday? And he was like, "Hey, chef." So
There put
that
you on the
whole
spot.
shift, I had all these guys coming up to me going, "What's Fireman Friday?" And I was like,
Like, huh?
you know,
What?
ah,
Let me reevaluate my handbook. There it is on page 12. That's brilliant, right?
yeah, it is.
And
It
that is
was.
what I love about what I do with that. It ties to that, right? Is that if you can find things that really motivate people, and then you constantly assess and coach and mentor people to really understand that they're doing a good job, or things that need to change, right, with the coaching and mentoring. That's what builds that great team of people that can take a restaurant to the whole next level. you know
Absolutely.
what do you think
They,
your average check changed on them Fireman Friday?
well, I'll tell you what. So he did he did that and then came up with another exercise, in the next quarter. And
Hmm.
he was very good at that part. Sometimes it was comedic, sometimes it was, just something simple, like we used to pop our collars. I For a long time in my career, I always wore a porter coat. Um, Almost like a t-shirt, something that a dishwasher would wear, and it had my name on my jacket.
Hmm.
Um, and it was important to me because I didn't necessarily want to remove where I came from. Now, longer into my career, that obviously has to change a little bit, but the
Hmm.
mentality for me is still parts, and let me back up a little bit. Parts of that mentality I don't want to lose because
Yeah.
I want to be a cook for the rest of my life. And I
Yeah.
made that decision a long time ago. Um, I want to be that person that cooks. Like that's just what I want to do. I already made the decision.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not gonna waver. Now, I am not the line cook that I was 25 years ago. You know, I am now, a business owner and operator, but it's it's still part of me that I don't want to let go because I do know that part of me is what
Hmm.
got me to where I am,
Got you where you
you
are.
know?
Right. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm the guy that has worked through multiple shoes. I've worked through, multiple uniforms, injuries, blah blah blah, whatever, the story goes on. But
Yeah.
you have to. I kind of wanted to keep myself centered and
Hmm.
and and grounded in the sense that I can still cook,
Yeah.
and if anything were to happen, I'm gonna. That's what I'm gonna do.
Right.
You know. I'm not afraid of doing the work, and I'm not afraid that if somebody else doesn't want to do it.
Right. Yeah.
I've lived through
So,
both of those things.
right. So, wrapping up here in closing. So, what advice do you have for our listeners who are in this situation right now, this time of year, where they're facing these challenges of their employees are going back to school, hiring new people coming in? What kind of advice would you have for our listeners?
Some of the challenge of knowing that your people are leaving, something like that can be hard. That could be a really
Hmm.
that can be emotional. It could be you know situational. It can cause stress on how am I going to get this done if I'm four people later on the schedule. How am I going to navigate through this? And I can tell you that if you step back and take your emotion out of that, it'll
Yeah.
it'll change your whole perception of what you're looking at. I think
Yeah.
that's step one. And step two is understanding that if you want to find yourself in the same exact position next year, don't learn from the mistake that you're about to make because you're emotional instead of, like it's going to happen again. Now,
Yeah.
not everybody's going to leave on bad terms. Not everybody's going to leave on good terms. There's
Right.
no way to know what's about to happen. I've
Right.
had both things happen. I've had, I have a lot of experience in really good things and some really like not good things. And what I found was no matter what I did, not so many of those things were preventable anyway.
Hmm.
You're going to be a good manager to someone.
Hmm.
You're going to be a good employee to some manager. Somewhere that's going to happen. It might not be your current situation, but somewhere along the line in your career, you're going to connect with a company, you're going to connect with a person in the industry, and
Hmm.
it's going to build a relationship over years.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
um, so if you know that your whole staff is leaving in 3 months, well, plan now, man. Like do that work today. Sit down, write out that scenario, solve half of your problem, and you'll be much better off come September.
Right. And that's what I want to tie to that. Myself is my advice would be to, if it already isn't in place, have a program put in place so that you can, coach and mentor your people on how they're doing through the start of their career with you. So when you get to that point at the end, you will have something in place that makes it easier for you when you do lose these people to bring on the new people. You have some processes in place that can help you and guide them where you're not spending so much of your time and stressing out trying to replace these people.
Yeah, that's super important.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Scott, I appreciate you coming on again, man,
Thanks, Chuck.
and having this conversation. I think the next episode we should talk about those processes and procedures. What do you think? That might be a good episode.
That that sounds like a good topic too. I like that
Yeah, I, I,
that
I think
idea as
that's a
well.
good.
I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get some thoughts together, and our next episode we will talk about those processes and procedures and what we put in place to make this stress a little bit easier on both sides.
Great.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Scott,
Thanks, Chuck.
thanks again, man. Enjoy the conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day, but we'll talk soon.
You too. All right. I'll talk to you soon, Chuck. Thanks. Bye.
Take care, buddy. You've been listening to the Q.A.C. Team Podcast with your host, Charles Luttrell. Connect with us on the web at qacteam.com, Facebook and Instagram at qac.team. Thanks for listening.